We recently went back in time to recreate the first ever triathlon on British soil. And while we were there, we got to thinking, how fast is today's tri gear? How much of the gains over the years been due to equipment, and how much of it is better training methods and better athletes? Well, we have the gear from yesteryear, and thanks to our great brand partners, we also have the latest and greatest triathlon gear. So today, we're going to find out how slow was old triathlon gear, or rather, how fast is today's triathlon gear? Let's hope it's actually faster, otherwise this video might really damage the industry. Alright, we're going to start with the swim, but there's actually not too much to discuss here because back in 1983 when triathlon started in the UK, you weren't allowed wetsuits at all, ever. In fact, it was triathlon's first big controversy because in 1986 there was a big debate with one camp saying that allowing wetsuits eroded the very essence of triathlon, of the challenge, and a whole another camp saying that freezing your butt off in the swim would just deter new triathletes from joining and hamstring the sport. And there's not much point in comparing speedo swimming with wetsuit swimming because, let's face it, wetsuit swimming is going to be significantly faster. So let's discuss what we've come here to see. We've brought a nice British summer weather with us too. To do this, they didn't have global warming back in the 80s either. Okay, we have a Rally Banana team bike. And this is an impressive bike. It's a bit of a classic and the specs are not that impressive anymore, but it is a pretty good looking bike for its age. And then we have the Canyon Speedmax CFR, which needs no introduction, and it is a stunning bike. We're going to put them head to head, and then we'll compare running shoes from 40 years ago with the latest running shoes. So in the interest of science, we're going to put the Wahoo power pedals on both bikes. Now, before you complain, yes, I know there weren't Wahoo power pedals back in the 1980s. In fact, there weren't even clipless pedals back in the 1980s. The first clipless pedals were invented in 1984 by Look with their P65 or PP65, and then in 1988, Time released their TBT pedals. Before that, everyone just used rat trap pedals, flat pedals with a toe clip, a clip for your toe, hence the term clipless pedals that were invented later on. But in the interest of science and comparing our power on the two bikes, we're going to use the Wahoo Speedplay pedals on both bikes. Let me run through the rest of the specs because it's not really a fair fight here. The Rally Team Banana frame is made out of 1823 steel. I'm not sure what that means, but that's what it's made out of. The Canyon Speedmax CFR, of course, is made out of carbon fiber. The wheels on the Rally Team Banana are, I'm not actually sure what those are. They were special off the internet just to get the bike moving. Whereas on the Canyon Speedmax, we have the DT Swiss ARC 1100 64mm front and 80mm rear. As for the components, the Rally Team Banana has a whopping 6-speed gears, and that's it. Whereas the Canyon Speedmax CFR is fitted with 11-speed Ultegra Di2. As for the aero bars, the Rally Team Banana has none, whereas the Canyon Speedmax has the integrated Canyon aero bars up front. I'm going to use the same shoes and pedals as I mentioned, and I'm going to use the same helmet too, just to kind of make it a fair comparison. Now, normally when we're comparing two bikes, we do a whole series of tests, but because we're just comparing triathlons, we figured we'd try and do a triathlon specific kind of course. So we've come here to the Odd Down track, which is a kind of crit course. Now, normally I would also try and maintain the same power on each bike so we can really see whether it's the aerodynamics or the weight or whatever that's making the difference. But because the setups, the fits are so different, I can't really even do that because to hold the same power on the Rally Banana is going to take significantly more effort on my part than holding that power on the Canyon Speedmax CFR. So I'm literally just going to ride 4 laps of the track as hard as I can, and afterwards we'll compare heart rate, power, and obviously the time it takes me to cover those laps. Let's get into our bike kit, see what we've got. 3, 2, 1, go. That was a bit of hard work. Now it's time to stop the pedals and get on the old bike. There's a few more things that could go wrong with the bike, not to mention dubious brakes, not such great gears. Well, we'll give it a go. It's all grass verges. What could go wrong? Right, 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, oh, we're off. Give it some power. Gears. Whoop. Whoa. Brakes on the bars. Nice. I think we all know the results of this one. Good old steed, but probably belongs in a museum. Let's go download those numbers and we'll tell you the results. All right, well, these results are not going to surprise anyone. There are a few factors that come into these results. One of the big ones was actually how hard I was willing to push on the old bike. Both my position and how hard I could push, but also how much I trusted the gears, how much I trusted the brakes, and how much I just trusted the whole thing mechanically. But here are the results without any further ado. On the new Canyon Speed Max CFR, I took 9 minutes and 7 seconds to do the 6K lap at an average of 39 kilometers an hour with an average power of 342 watts and a peak power of 550. So I was pushing along, and I definitely couldn't push that hard with the old bike. The old bike was a total of 48 seconds slower than the new bike. The old banana bike was definitely been left in for dead. Average power of only 238 or 100 watts slower. I just couldn't push the power. I did try, honestly, I wasn't fudging it. I did try. I mean, my heart rate was almost exactly the same. I just couldn't get the power out of the bike. So yeah, 48 seconds slower over just 6Ks. That translates to like 24 minutes slower over an Ironman. It's a substantial difference. So maybe all those Ironman times you see today are just because the equipment is so good. We've popped into our local friendly sports scientist, Jonathan Robertson at the University of Bath, Team Bath, and we're going to do an economy test on this, the high-tech Silver Shadow versus this, the On Cloudboom Echo 3. You might recognize these. These are the high-tech Silver Shadow that I used in our retro triathlon. They were launched in 1981 to conquer the running category. And they were used by a staggering 23% of competitors at that year's London Marathon. They were the best running shoe money could buy in 1981. They featured lightweight suede, soft cushioning on the collar and the tongue, nylon D-rings for the laces, a hard-wearing outsole, and, get this, a soft EVA removable insole for additional comfort. And they are up against these, the On Cloudboom Echo 3, On's latest and greatest running shoe, featuring a extremely lightweight upper, a claimed 211 grams for a size UK 7 shoe, a full-length carbon plate sandwiched between 2 layers of Pebax foam. They really are the latest and greatest, the best money can buy. All right, let's find out how much faster shoes are. We're going to start by testing the economy of these old 40-year-old shoes. Jonathan, thank you for taking the time today to test these shoes with us. What are we actually testing for? What are we going to see on these tests as far as which shoe is faster?
So basically what we'll do is we're going to measure your oxygen consumption while you run. We're going to do 2 different speeds, and we're going to use the old shoes and the new shoes at each speed. So there'll be 4 tests in total. And then we're going to measure how much oxygen you're using to run at that speed. And then from that, we can work out running economy, which is basically how much oxygen you use to run a certain distance. Lower scores are better, so you're more efficient, more economical.
Okay, let's hope these 40-year-old shoes are actually less economical. Otherwise, the whole industry is going to be ruined.
I was born in the dark. You merely adopted the dark.
Oh, the heart rate up. Thank you.
All right.
Yep. All right, Jonathan, subjectively, I think I already know the answer, but run us through the numbers of what we found on these tests with the 2 shoes.
Okay, great. So what we've got on the screen, if you can see it, is the oxygen consumption in blue and carbon dioxide production in red. This is the 12k an hour, and this is 16k an hour.
And this is the new on-running Cloud
these
Blue
are
Mecha.
the
Okay.
on shoes. And you can see there's quite a big difference between the two.
Yeah.
Usually, in kind of fairly simple terms, as the red gets closer to the blue, it means you're working harder. And once the red starts to creep above the blue, you're kind of working above threshold.
So even at 16 kilometers an hour, there's some big gaps
there's
between the
still
red
some
and the
gaps
blue. Yeah.
there. But interestingly, if we swap now to the high-tech shoes, we can see, especially at 16k, the red is starting to creep above. So relatively, you're finding it much harder to run at that speed.
Essentially, at 16 k's an hour in these, I'm pretty much over my threshold, whereas at 16 kilometers an hour in the ons, I'm significantly under my threshold still.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's significant.
Yeah. When we look at economy, we basically like to convert those millilitres per kilogram figures, the VO2 figures, into an economy figure, which is mils per kilogram per kilometre, so how much oxygen it takes you to run a kilometre.
Yeah.
And from the on shoes, we've got scores of 201 at 12k an hour and 205 at 16k an hour. The important thing to remember is lower scores are better, so you use less oxygen.
Okay.
So in the high-tech shoes, it's 212 at 12k an hour and 215 at 16k an hour.
So that's between 6 and 5% faster in the on shoes, just because I changed the shoes. Same speed.
Yeah, and in terms of the running economy, just broadly speaking, you'd probably say an elite endurance athlete's probably around 190 to 200 mils per kilogram per K, and a more recreational, less endurance trained athlete is probably 215 to 220.
Wow, so I have 215 in these and 205 in these. Literally, changing to the on shoes from the high tech is changing me from a recreational runner economy to an elite runner economy. That's profound. 5 to 6% economy improvement. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean 5 to 6% faster. That needs to be pointed out. For a slower runner who takes longer out there, a 5 to 6 economy improvement actually might be about 5 to 6% improvement in time. But for the better runners, the more economical runners, the faster runners who are running closer to like 3 minutes a K, that's probably only going to translate to a 2 to 3% improvement in time. But even so, you're probably looking at 1 to 1.5 minutes faster on Olympic distance, just on the run, just by changing your shoes to the new shoes, and about 5 minutes faster by changing from an old Rally Banana bike to a brand new Canyon Speedmax CFR. That's a big difference, 6.5 minutes on Olympic distance, and you're talking probably well over half an hour, probably closer to 45 minutes on an Ironman. So there you have it, folks. All you have to do to get more than half an hour faster in an Ironman is wait for 40 years. Of course, that's not accounting for age, because let's face it, 40 years ago, I wouldn't have been very fast in an Ironman, and in 40 years' time, I probably also won't be.